Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. Well, folks, we've made it through. I'm talking about the whole election situation, but really, we're really not out of it yet. Not especially after I saw the news last night where former President Donald Trump announced the fact that he's running for president again. And then naturally, President Biden announced the fact that he was running also again. So all of a sudden, we're right back into politics. But in all due respect, we've got our own politics here in the state of Oregon. And we went through quite an ordeal over this last few months. I mean, and even the pandemic was still running around at this point in time, and people were still kind of stressed out and whatever. But we made it through. But now we've got to focus on our issues here within the state of Oregon. And in all due respect, I think we need to spend a little, I spent a little time running around the state and gotten involved. You've probably seen me some way, shape, or form. But the whole idea was to be fair to all three candidates. And one of the issues that I was very concerned with was the lack of participation of Oregonians who happen to be people of color, so consequently, I got involved a little bit to a point to sort of balance it out a bit, or whatever. But we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But what we want to do, we want to talk about the living room of the state of Oregon. And when you start thinking about the living room of Oregon, you think about Portland, Oregon. And boy, I tell you, it was quite a situation with the Portland, Oregon aspect of it. We had quite an event. I spent most of my time in that particular area, but it's essential that we do something with Portland, if you will, because they're going to be basically the leading force, if you will, if in fact we're going to achieve the kind of things that we've had before in this city of roses and all of the positive things that we have. You know, we still have that freeway I-5 and everybody's coming in. People coming in from the East Coast and just honing in, and well, I can go on and on and on. But what we're going to do today is that we're going to just kind of discuss what were the activities, what were so active during the particular time of the election process, and what did that mean, if you will, during those discussions, and then where should we be going. So I thought I'd invite two historical figures, but they're here physically within our presence. See, in my days, there was a guy that I knew very well, and we butted head at times. His name was John Duran. And John was quite a guy, And so anyway, we can talk a little bit about that, but John wasn't one of the guys. And the other one was a lady by the name of Donna Maxey. And boy, I tell you, she was very active too. And each has their own their so-called lane, if you will. I stayed in my lane, whatever. He's still here. He's definitely still here. It just so happened that I have both representation of both Turan and the Maxies, if you will. John's son is here with me today. John Turan, there he is. And Kay is still there though. She's still banging on him. And then John basically called me last night. Said, "Bruce, where's my son?" so anyway, he's here today, folks.
Thanks for having me, Bruce.
Sounds good. And then naturally you've seen Shayna. You've seen Shayna Maxey, but she's got what was that last name?
Pomerantz.
I'm trying to do it right. she knows I am by name. But anyway,
yes.
Pomerantz. And Donna's still here with us.
Yep.
But now she's
living in well.
But now she's basically running the phrase talk aspect of it. And I tell you, I'm really excited about that because she's a force in herself, and both of us, for that matter, are trying to basically give her a baton, if you will. And she's also taking a little part in trying to give me some guidance, for that matter, in the whole issue with the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm really excited about that. That's the video aspect of it, and then naturally you see my gear that I have on. Also, I'm very interested in the whole issue of the military, and that's another point that I think there's a need, if you will. I'm really still excited about the fact. I'm not excited about the fact, but I'm looking at trying to lobby as much as I can to bring the whole issue of the draft back, because that was the only mixing pot we had in this country. It's unfortunate, but hey, you just take it one step at a time. Now but like I said, we're going to go on. I've got these two folks here. Welcome aboard, buddy.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So what we're going to do now is that I'm going to be the so-called referee, if you will. This is going to be kind of nice. I mean, normally I would be the host,
But we get along so
yeah,
well.
but the idea is that normally I'm the host, but we're all co-hosts today. So,
Cool.
and these folks here are not the kinds of folks that just sit back and just allow folks just to keep talking. They'll just jump right in. That's what we're supposed to do, because we got to be very aggressive during this particular time. If in fact we're going to get our city going in a very positive, a holistic, right, involving everybody, right? Is that fair? Okay. So with that, why don't we just, John, we'll give you a couple of minutes to kind of just share a little thought about your background and your mom and your dad, and because Shana, we've done that part.
Okay.
And then we'll jump right into our discussion.
Well, it even goes back further than my mom and dad. My family recently had their business put on the Oregon Historical Registry for the oldest black business in existence here in Oregon.
Which was?
That's Dean's Beauty Salon and Barbershop.
Oh, okay.
So, my grandfather and grandmother built that salon out of the ground in the 1950s in Portland. They weren't walking into a bank to get a loan. So, they started that legacy on that end. And I think my mom was a continuation of that.
Don't hit the table.
Sorry. Yep. My mom was sort of a continuation of that, along with her sister and brother. And then my dad moved out here. He was in the Navy, and he was a boxer in the Navy.
Yep.
And Portland had a history of being like a great place to launch your career for boxing back in the 50s and 60s. He wound up going to law school. I think he was probably about the 5th black attorney in the state. Back in those times, there were so few black attorneys that he was basically practicing everything: criminal law, civil law, probably even some admin law, and dealing with like the cities and stuff like that. And they got together and they had me. I grew up in Northeast Portland. My dad's office was always in downtown Portland. I've taken over of that, and so I've been in downtown Portland consistently for like the last 7 years. Background wise, I've always I went to a historically black college right out of high school. I'm of the generation where a different world had a big impact on sort of like how I was going to be going into the world. And so it persuaded a lot of people of my age to go to historically HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities.
Which college was that?
I went to Hampton University.
Hampton, okay.
Real HU, my brother.
Yes.
Go ahead.
You went to HU?
I went to Hampton.
Yes. That's right. Okay, that's where I was trying to track you. Terry was always trying to point us together. I moved back to Portland in 1999 to be with my father during his final days. I have been in real estate up until like the great financial crisis. I took a little break to do a little bit of grad school, and which led to me doing a little bit of federal contracting. I wound up out in Washington, D.C., and I moved back to Portland in 2015. I've lived total probably like 12 cities. I've always kept a really open eye on like what cities do really good and what cities don't do so well. Hoping to take some of those lessons learned back here to Portland. Big traveler also. Longest trip ever was a year. Okay. Basically, I hitchhiked from San Francisco to Guatemala.
Okay, all right. What about Mom? You didn't say enough about Mom.
Mom, she's
Mom is very, very
Mom
active.
is a force.
Yeah.
Mom has been very active.
So is sister.
yes. My mom had a career in state government.
Yes.
The first governor to appoint her was Vicatia.
Yep.
That was the first governor that I met. It wasn't my first exposure to politics. My first exposure to politics was when I was 5. My dad ran for judge. Mm-hmm. One of the proudest things was him having the billboard up on Williams and Fremont. I don't know if you remember that one, but that was a big deal. My mom ran for city council in 1984, so that was like it was really good. That was my first exposure to a citywide campaign. Mm-hmm. And she basically has been my mom had been appointed by every governor through Kidshopper. And she retired in 1999 when a lot of state employees did, because like the PERS and the stock market and all that stuff. And then for the last 22 years, she's been running Volunteers of America, which is one of the
Doing a good job, too.
larger nonprofits in the city. And it's her birthday tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, happy birthday, Kay.
Yes.
Happy
All right.
birthday.
Hey, happy birthday. Good.
Should we push this back so it's
Sorry, I get a
watch this.
little
Looks
crazy with my
nice.
hands.
Okay, good. Okay. Community television, folks, you know this?
real life?
Okay, good. All right. I thought maybe it'd be good to share a little bit about your background and whatever. But like I said, the Shrans have always been around, and Mom is still very, very active.
Yes.
You know, in fact, she just went through an ordeal with the whole issue with what's this facility? I just keep forgetting about that facility.
Wapato.
Wapato.
Yeah.
Wapato. And met her, and we had a couple of chats and whatever. Sorry she didn't get that piece, because that would have been perfect, if you will, for our surrounding, because one of the major issues we're going to talk about is the whole issue of mental illness. And they have none. They used to have an entity out in the Beaverton area, and then developers came in and just cleaned it up, and we've never had anything since. So Wapato was a perfect piece. There's a lot of history on that other piece. But anyway, I just want you to know that you give her some time. She's still there, very, very active.
Yes.
And as I indicated before, your dad kind of called me up last night and said, Bruce, get him in there, Bruce. You got to get involved in this process aspect of it. So welcome aboard.
Well, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
good,
for
good.
having me.
Now, Shayna.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's see what we can do here. Bring them up to date real quick. Let's do our deal on race talk.
Yes. So I'm Shayna Adia Maxie Pomerantz. Uncle Bruce, I call you. Wanted me to give the full government to bring in the legacy of the Maxie family. And we're basically cousins, because my grandpa's first barbering job was at Dean's.
Very nice.
And then, of course, when he went on to have Cash and Maxie's Barbershop on Williams Avenue, and we had the family grocery store on the corner of Williams and Going, and then kind of rolls on from there.
Small.
So I wish my mom and your mom were here, because they would probably be able to bring in all the ways that our
They will
families
be.
know each
They will
other,
be.
and
We're doing this
the
purposely
legacy.
right
And
now.
I forgot you went to Hampton, so I don't
Yeah.
remember
Good.
when we were both there. But that also had a big impact on me about education. I'm a former school teacher prior to coming into leading Race Talks now as executive director for the last year and a half now. And I have a background in business and a JD, went to Southern University Law Center, so I definitely strongly advocate for Black people to go to HBCUs and be supported in Black education by Black educators. Yeah.
To add to that, I think probably the most important thing for me was being in an environment for 4 years where my problems weren't a result of my race.
Right.
You know, it's like I
Right.
can't have that excuse. Whatever problems I had, it wasn't because I was Black.
Well, and I don't know if you experienced this at Hampton, but Hampton, we have a loving rivalry with Howard,
Yes,
you know,
yes, the
and
other
it is,
issue.
and it's all love. But the interesting thing about Hampton, similar to Howard, is it is an international school. It's not a regional school like Southern and so many of our HBCUs, where people come from the state and they tend to go to school there and they stay. Hampton, like your Howards, your Spelman, your Morehouses, people come in and they're coming from all over the country. And what was really interesting for me, because as a kid, I thought Portland was all Black, and people laugh at me who are new to Portland, because they're like, imagine that's hilarious. And then people like ourselves who have, long, deep running roots here in the community do remember a Black Portland. And so being surrounded by Black folks intergenerationally in community. I grew up in Sacramento and Oakland. I had a Black Studies department in my high school. So going to a Black school at HBCU, I remember seeing school days when I was 11 actually here in Portland. And when my mom was prepping me for college, she said, my grandparents, it was like, you're going to go to a HBCU for at least 2 years. That's non-negotiable. That was pretty much pumped into me from the time I was 2 years old. And so when I got there, there was kind of this, okay, school days, you got, the light skin and the dark skin and the good hair and so on and so forth. So my mom being more richly melanated, she's like, okay, now everybody's gonna like you how you show up, you light skin, mixed girl, you're gonna need to adjust accordingly. And the part that was interesting for me about Hampton is that for as small as the school was, it's 3,500, so it's a pretty intimate environment, everyone. I was shocked by how many black kids had not been around other black people. This was the first time that folks were coming in and they're like, oh my gosh, it's normally me and my brother and sister in the school, or that one other black kid, or, it's like, or I went to boarding school outside of the neighborhood. It was very few black kids at Hampton who had been around black people. And so for me, I was like, no, this is just a continuation of Portland, which of course people are like, there's black people in Portland, or Oakland. Everybody knows about the Black Panthers and the history of Oakland. So that part was really surprising for me at Hampton. Of course, there are class issues. There's a lot of things that come up, but you're absolutely right. Any issues that people have with you at an HBCU, 9 times out of 10 is kind of that self-introspection part of like, oh, it's probably a me thing. It's not I'm black. It's how am I stepping into the space and getting acclimated to Southern culture. Everything is yes ma'am, yes sir. California culture, you step in, it's get down to business, state your business. We don't have time is money. In the South, it's like, so you just gonna come in and ask. You're not gonna ask how I'm doing. You're not gonna, no pleasantries. So it was definitely a big adjustment that I had the first time I went into the South compared to, 15 years later going to law school in Louisiana. I was better prepped to go be in that environment, even coming out of New York City, where I had to tone down my aggression a little bit. but it was a great experience.
And that's why I started thinking about my times when I was at Texas Southern University. See, we had TSU and Prairie Southern, the Southern school aspect of it.
Yeah.
So like you said,
and they have a law school too.
And they do, they do, and that was the other end, if you will. But it was kind of interesting to listen to what you guys were sharing in terms of where you were, and then the progression from us saying, and now here we are today.
Yeah.
Got me? So good. I think that's enough. Why don't we just jump right into the political piece? Well, let's start off with you, Tina. You had raised star. You had me involved at one point in time in that whole piece.
Yeah, we had a candidate forum, and we've been doing candidate forums. So dating back to 2018, we've been doing candidate forums where we have an opportunity to talk about issues of race and racism as a conversation piece for folks running. So the first one we had, most notable, was between Joanne Hardesty and Loretta Smith, and so that was a pretty big. It wasn't a debate. It was we call it a forum because the idea is you're not debating whatever your platform issues are. We're really trying to get a sense of, as a marginalized community, black folks, we represent less than 6% of the population here in Portland, 2% in the state. We want to know how you feel about us. And so we've expanded that conversation to other candidates running in other positions. So at the point that I was able to pull you in, it was a opportunity to talk to both Joanne Hardesty and AJ McCreary, who are both running for separate city council seats. And it was an interesting conversation because instead of having 2 black women running against each other for the same seat, we now had 2 black women, different generations. We had issues of colorism that we were able to talk about, generational perspectives about stepping into running for office. And so it was a really great conversation to be able to speak with both of them. Are you planning on doing
more of this at that time?
I would love to continue to engage in these conversations. In fact, we had a primary conversation with the city positions, with the auditor and the seat 2 and 3, and when we had the general come around, I met with Renee Gonzalez and Joanne Hardesty separately and tried to line up the calendars, and it was just really difficult bringing them together. And I'm really curious how that conversation would have gone because, again, you have 2 people of color running for a city council position. You have Joanne as a black woman. You have Renee Gonzalez as a Latino man. Some things they were I won't say they were aligned. They were definitely kind of speaking and going in the same direction, and in other issues, absolutely not. And so it was nice to be able to speak to Renee offline and kind of get to know him. I've known Joanne for years, so I feel like I know how she feels about being a Black woman and being here in community and where her policy and politics land. I didn't know that about Renee, so being able to dig more deeply into his experience and his roots gave me more insight. You know,
I really appreciate it because that's why I was involved, and I liked it. The format because the need to get more Blacks to run for office is an issue.
Yeah.
And even Latinos in many ways. They're a little bit more assertive today because whatever. I mean, well,
We've got 2 Latina members of Congress right now. It's, I think Latinas had a pretty decent election cycle, across the country.
Well, they're in all due respect, they're the top assertive group, the minority group. I mean, that's a fact. However, the trailblazers were Blacks. That's a fact. You know what I'm saying? So the idea is that it's not about this; it's about getting together. We're constantly being made the point about minorities per se. We're not minorities per se. We're part of the total community. We're all Americans. You got me? And until we get to that assimilation aspect of it, as that's a sensitive area, got my point. Hopefully, at some point in the day, we're all looked upon alike. But the idea is you got to give these folks the opportunities to do that, and there's a process for doing that. Something like the thing that Shana was doing, and the fact of the matter is, give them a vehicle, if you will, to basically go. I mean, we used to have debates. We used to have, ways to reach out to folks to get the information out to them and have those educational kinds of things that teach them how, if you will, to get into the political process, which is a problem. So hopefully, Jana, you're going to probably focus on that.
Well, you made a comment earlier that we didn't have a lot of people of color running for office, but actually I thought it was interesting, for quite a number of the positions, especially amongst the legislature, there actually were a number of candidates of color. We had a number of Muslim candidates who were running. I mean, and especially if we're looking also at the national campaigns, not just limiting it to Oregon, we had a significant number of, when I saw the kind of congressional races popping up, I'm like, and another Black person, and another Black person, and not just Democrat, Republican too. So hopefully we start normalizing this. I feel like we are all part of that generation where we remember there's been one Black leader, and that person is supposed to kind of speak for all of us in community. And so we are now stepping, I think, especially amongst the Black community, to realize, one, we're not monolithic. I think the word is getting out beyond the Black community that, folks are understanding we are not monolithic. We do not think the same thing. We do not share the same values. The thing we share is how we're treated as Black people in this country. That's where the real commonality comes down to it. We just even talking about the governor's race, we all have very different ways that we stepped into even that race. And so I hope we'll jump into that conversation. But that's the reality right now in terms of us as Black people, looking at who best represents our interests. And just because you are a Black candidate, I saw James Posey on your show recently. He did not support Joanne. We also have issues around Black men supporting Black women, which is another issue in and of itself. So there's a number of factors that are coming into when somebody decides to run in. And then also it's timely, it's costly, there's the emotional labor that goes into it. So I think saying, yes, we need more Black people to run for office is true, but just being Black in America is a struggle in a lot of ways, and getting up every day. And so when we look at, do I want to take this extra thing on, and who's going to have my back and support me when I choose to do it? That's a big decision for any person to make.
But the point is, as we started off, the idea was Portland. I was trying to focus on the Portland area.
Let's jump into Portland.
We made an attempt some time ago, and as a result of that, we got the Lou Fredericks and the Margaret Carters and the Avale Gordons and whatever. When we put together District 18, we had an address in the state for the state of Oregon for the first time. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get together to keep it, and I think that's a very important piece, if you will.
Yeah, I remember in 2000, I gave testimony over at Jefferson High School. That's when the integrity of the district was broken down, broken apart. I can't remember who was the Secretary of State at the time, but yeah, we were very vocal about keeping the integrity of that district. District 43, I thought it was, or something like that.
That's where it was. Yeah,
in 2000.
Yeah, but now in '84, up in that area, that's when we did 18.
Shifting,
We did
numbers
18,
change.
and that's how we got that part of it. But like I said, we did it, and I'm just saying that we everything has an address. And now here all of a sudden the city is now basically giving us another opportunity to put together an address. The idea of 4 districts, and then 3 commissioners per district. That's a very interesting piece.
Very interesting.
There will be representation, hopefully, from all groups, and that matter. So hopefully, everybody will take advantage of that situation, and they're going to be basically majority rule even within the district. If you got 3 people, you're going to have, at least have 2 votes, right? But the fact of the matter is, the issues will be discussed, and then brought to the table. And there'll be some recognition. It's not just one entity sitting for the city of Portland making the decision and distributing the bureaus, you know what I mean, and taking them back when they want to and whatever. And now we're sort of like whatever. And the other thing is that it'll always also help. I think this time around, they're going to have resumes. People are going to have resumes. It's not about buying the seat.
Yeah.
That's another big problem we've been having here in the city of Portland. And I'm not knocking the folks. Back to the business tend to try. They've got their own issues that they're trying to focus on. But it's the people. It still is the people, and it still is a community. We don't have a community today, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think just like looking at politics, and one of the things you kind of touched on a little bit earlier is I feel like campaigns have been digitized. Everything's about like commercials and everything like that, and what seems like it has become forgotten is like ground game, which is just in going out and engaging with voters. Consultants aren't going to tell you, oh, go build a ground game. But it's like once you develop that ground game, that develops basically an army. And those people support whatever they're supporting, whatever cause, issue, person, out of love. And there's there's nothing that polls or TV commercials or anything like that can do anything about that. So developing that infrastructure of a ground game would be something I think that could really help black candidates. Once you're able to give them that infrastructure, it makes raising money a lot easier. If somebody goes into a rich person's office and they know that they have 150 volunteers that are going to go out and hand out flyers for them, it makes that ask a lot easier. So there are ways to approach it, but being minority, we have to approach it differently.
You bring up a good point too, talking about the charter change, right, with the city council makeup. There's 3 black women on that charter review committee, and I think so often we lose sight of the fact that part of this ground game is you have to put people in key positions for these kinds of decisions to be made. So when we talk about having a seat at the table, sometimes the table is not seen to everyone, and and we don't always know what these tables are, but there are really important conversations that are being had behind the scenes, and I think that's something that we in community understand, and we're seeing, and we're starting to understand the significance of also not just running for office, but any decisions that are being made about how we can run for office, how many seats are available, the charter and the rules that govern. We need to be at those tables too. And it might be thankless work, but Salome, Candace, Amira, 3 black women who are on the charter review committee put a lot of time and energy. Yes, there were other people of color, and I don't know all the names, but those are 3 women that I'm aware of. And when I heard that they were appointed, not fully understanding what the charter process was about, it actually gave me a sense of relief because I at least understood them. I know who they are. I know them by either personal or professional reputation. And so just knowing that they were going to be present, my interests were going to be represented in that conversation.
Well, you make a good point, because that's how I sort of met you. Because I'm always tuning in the evening, if you will, late evening, and looking at those committee meetings, if you will. And that was the first that I had seen. I'd been involved in a lot of things, but not this kind of a format, right? That was community. You know what I mean? And as a result of that, we had fruits that come out. I mean, that developed fruits, because there was only 3 people that said no to what they had or what they voted on, and they spent a lot of money. Those 3 entities, and gotten together, and that's all the activities you saw in regards to saying, no, we don't need this so-called districtizing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And but again, these people stood together, and the community voted.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the business folks; the community voted, and as a result, we got this.
Yeah.
So the idea now is to make it work,
Right.
because I'm going to spend my time to make sure that I communicate with those folks who are appointed to that committee, to educate the folks about what it means on both sides. Everybody has a vote, but my point is that, what does it mean? What goals are we trying to achieve? And are we actually directing our efforts and energy towards doing that?
I like it.
So that's kind of like where my head's at this point in time. But I think this is good. I'm glad you brought up about the. So I take it Ray Stokes going to be doing something on there. You guys going to do anything, or are we going to have a discussion here? Bring these women on?
We can definitely have a conversation here. I can definitely reach out to all 3 of them and ask them to come in, because I think
you can
similar
host it.
with even the vote that took place around the independent police review and the citizens review committee, which is the committee you're talking about that I used to sit on. You know, just because something's not working doesn't mean we have to trash it. Sometimes there's major tweaking. Sometimes it's the people who are administering or sitting at the table. You know, if you look around and you're trying to say we want to have an equitable approach to something, and then the only people you see are cis white men over the age of 55, you know, I can tell you, I don't feel like my interests are represented at that table just by looking. I don't know everybody's
it won't
story.
happen again.
I don't know how you all feel about that
no,
as men, but as a black woman, that's how I look. And so, in fact, when I met Renee Gonzalez, you know, I said, hey, if you come on, my concern with Joanne Hardesty not being there anymore is, at least when she was there, even if I don't agree with everything she does, I know that she's a black woman in community, and she understands what it means to be a black woman living in Portland, Oregon. You don't have that experience, and you're a relatively passing, fair-skinned Latino man living here. And so that was also a very interesting conversation to talk about complexion and colorism, and this idea of passing as a person of color, and, you know, which happens to me, which is why I tend to be very vocal and get labeled as being too outspoken and aggressive in a lot of spaces. So
what do you think about that, John?
Yeah, that was a really hard race, you know, for me. Because, you know, overall, I'm not happy with, you know, where we're at in Portland. And I have disagreed with Hardesty on a lot of issues. But she's always been that voice, even when she was down at the legislature. And just like Shayna said, just knowing that Joanne's there means that they're going to act as, you know, when those 65-year-old white men start making rules, they're going to act a little bit different way and take into account for that. And we know that Renee's not going to be able to offer that. You know, he's all of his life, I'm sure he's fit in. So, you know, that's a big loss.
Should she run for one of those seats?
I think it makes sense. I think she will be back.
One of the district seats,
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, she already has the base. She's earned the votes. So yeah, I definitely expect to see her back.
You know, and my thought, I hope she will be back, but I hope she's able to take some time to rest. And I hope we as a community can reflect, because these next 2 years are going to be really interesting. Yes, we have Mingus Maps as a black man on city council. Carmen Rubio has always been an amazing community advocate, but her voice hasn't really stood out too much with a Joanne Hardesty, you know. And so I see Carmen being not just the woman minority on the dais, but in terms of progressive leadership and kind of being an advocate for issues that I'm concerned about. I see that more or less falling on her, and being really concerned, you know, about wanting to make sure she feels supported, but also recognizing, you know, that's a really hard position, and Joanne has held it. And I think there's a lot of things that people have assumed about Joanne and her personality, but it'll be really interesting now that there's that void. And people have blamed Joanne for a lot of things on the city council, and now she won't be there. So is it kind of like the Obama effect? You know, Obama's not there, and now it's like, oh, thanks, Hardesty. You know, it's like, she ain't here, and she didn't create the problems. You know,